Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait a little bit longer for more people. We've got a couple of minutes left. Hi, everyone. I'm Mav Kim up here in cold Jericho Center, getting ready to have a lot of snow. At the moment, I have everyone else muted and unable to share their pictures. It's fun to see the faces, but we have somewhat limited internet strength here. So getting rid of the photos and the extra noise makes a huge difference in the strength of the presentation. But at the end, or anytime during this whole presentation, you can put questions or comments about what you've been seeing in the chat, and I will check the chat frequently. I just wait another 30 seconds or so. Hi, Bill. I'm glad you joined again. Okay, let's get started. I may have to interrupt sometimes to admit more people, but basically we are here now with winter birds. We all know that winter in Vermont can be dark and cold and even dreary. And lots of the birds that we just liked so much during the spring and the summer and the fall have deserted us. Right now, they are basking in warm sunshine in the southern parts of the US or around the Caribbean or even in South America. But lots of birds didn't leave us. And tonight is a celebration of those hardy winter flying creatures. We will look first at birds that might come to backyard feeders, and then we'll enjoy birds that we can find in agricultural fields or in the woods or along dirt roads or on Vermont lakes and streams. Several people in tonight's audience are participating in the 123rd annual Audubon Christmas Bird Count. It's going to be between tomorrow and January 5th. And it's a wintertime survey that involves thousands of volunteers all over North America and now in more than a dozen other countries. And this once a year census, it's sort of a census, provides scientists with valuable information about how many birds there are, where they're spending their winters, etc. So from time to time, I will give some specific information aimed at the Christmas bird counters. But in general, we're just talking about the beautiful birds. Sorry, I don't know why that sometimes does that noise. Okay, we'll start out with a bird that I think everybody knows, children and adults alike. Everybody knows and I think loves black-capped chickadees. They are incredibly cute for one thing. They're also quite comfortable with people, around people. We've even gotten them to eat out of our hands last year. They need a lot of nutritious food to keep them going through a long winter. So they take in hundreds and hundreds of seeds or nuts, and they eat some immediately, but they store many, many under little bits of bark or in tree cavities. And an amazing fact about these birds is that they remember every single one of their hiding places. And every fall, chickadees actually grow the part of their brains that are responsible for spatial memory. And every spring, they don't need it again for a while. They're going to be concentrating on courting and nesting. So they let those brain cells die and then grow them again the next fall, which is quite amazing. Both white-breasted and red-breasted nuthatches also happily come to backyard feeders to get seeds or peanuts. The red-breasted ones are much less common. They're smaller, and they're much more skittish around people. These petite, delicate little creatures tend to zip in and grab one seed or one nut and leave a feeder immediately, whereas white-breasted nuthatches will sometimes spend a while just chipping at one little bit of food, eating it on the spot before taking some others away to store it. This beautiful tufted titmouse visits our feeders here regularly. And you can easily recognize a tufted titmouse. One, they are tufted. They have that adorable little crest or tuft. And they have unusually big eyes for birds. And then, of course, the gray back and head, the white front, and a little blush of sort of orangey on the sides. Now, blue jays, everyone knows blue jays too. They love seed and nuts too, to eat today and to store for later. And they are really good at taking things away to store. I read recently that a blue jay can carry 5 acorns at a time. Those are big. They put 2 or 3 in the throat pouch, one in the mouth, and then one more held tightly at the tip of the bill. We haven't watched them doing that with acorns, but we have watched a blue jay pick up as many as 10 unshelled peanuts at one time, sort of lining them up in his bill before flying away. Some kinds of woodpeckers also hide food or store it, but actually the kinds that we have here in Vermont usually find enough to eat all winter long without having to store it up ahead of time. This is a hairy woodpecker. Looks very, very much like a downy woodpecker, but the downies are smaller, and very important, their bills are noticeably smaller in relation, or in comparison rather, to their heads, which is a good way to tell the difference. The males of both species have a bit of red on their heads, and the females don't. And these woodpeckers are just huge. From one wingtip to the other, a pileated woodpecker can measure as much as 30 inches. And by the way, it's either pileated or pileated. They're both right. The most favorite food of pileated woodpeckers is ants. They eat other things, lots of other things, but they really love ants. And if you look closely at this picture, you see that this bird has his tongue extended, just lapping up some carpenter ants in that rotting wood. And when they find ants in rotting wood, they make huge, deep trenches and just clean out everything they can find in there before going to find another tree that's riddled with ants. So we have some birds here in Vermont that store food for over the winter, and we've got a lot that don't. And those birds have to eat pretty much all day long, every single day during our cold winters. This little American tree sparrow eats its weight in seed every single day. That's like a human adult chowing down on over 150 pounds of food in 24 hours. You can easily recognize tree sparrows by the little rusty cap and the little dark smudge on the middle of a paler breast. And if you look closely, you see the bill is two different colors, dark on the top and sort of yellowish on the bottom. Tree sparrows nest and raise their young on far northern Canadian tundra. And they come down here to Vermont for winter, just the way Vermonters sometimes go to Sarasota or Phoenix or something. Ah, it's so nice and warm down here. We can see other kinds of sparrows here in Vermont in the winter. White-throated sparrows are really well named. The white throats are very obvious. There are two kinds that we have here. There are two kinds anyway. One has the black and white stripes that you see in this picture, and the other has tan and brown stripes. And oddly enough, or they must know the reason, white-throated sparrows that have black and white stripes almost always choose mates that have brown and tan stripes, and vice versa. This is one of my favorite winter birds, the dark-eyed junco. They are really pleasing little animals with their neat gray and crisp white and those little pink bills. Juncos are more often seen on the ground under feeders than on the feeders themselves. The females are more tan or brown than gray. They just do have gray also. But as a species, juncos show an incredible amount of variation in their plumage. There's black and brown and dark gray and very light gray and very light brown and tan, and even splotchy or mottled like these. That may be quite confusing when you see one for the first time. They all have one characteristic, though, that makes, well, two actually, that makes them easy to recognize. One is the pink bill, and the other, even if you see a flock of juncos flying away from you, you can recognize them because they have white outer tail feathers. Let's look at some other birds that feeder watchers might see in the winter. Northern cardinals just glow in the winter without all that distracting foliage around them, like this beautiful female and this gorgeous male. Cardinals weren't around here in Vermont until the late 1950s. The species expanded their range northward, possibly because of the increase in backyard feeding stations, or possibly because of gradual climate change, or possibly for many other reasons. The soft colors of mourning doves really look beautiful against a snow-covered landscape. Doves are another bird that doesn't store food like chickadees or nuthatches do. So this is another species that has to eat huge amounts of seed every single day in the winter. And we humans can really help by leaving dead flower heads standing. Instead of cutting them down or putting them in the compost, those flower heads are full of tiny, healthy seeds that many birds enjoy in the winter. American goldfinches eat our flower seeds too, and grass seeds. This is a male in summer plumage, all bright and beautiful, so he can attract a mate. But by the time the first snow falls, both male and female goldfinches have much quieter colors. And I love this picture because it's just a sweet little bird, even in the less dramatic colors. We might see 3 other kinds of finches at the feeders. And the word finch, by the way, means a small seed-eating songbird. We might see house finches. The males are streaky brown birds with areas of reddish orange that vary quite a lot. Some of them are really almost all orange and some more red orange. And the females don't have that bright color at all, which makes sense. A lot of bird females are very quiet colored so that they can be fairly camouflaged when they're on a nest. Purple finch males look like sparrows dipped in raspberry juice. That's what Roger Torrey Peterson said. He wrote the first widely popular field guide to birds, a sparrow dipped in raspberry juice. And the females are somewhat similar to house finch females, except that they're darker overall. And if you see them on the side, they have really heavy white eyebrows, which helps in identification. And every few years, Vermont feeders might get visited by pine siskins. They look sort of like streaky goldfinches with sharp pointed bills and short notched tails. And they have just a little bit of yellow edging on their wings and their tails. Here's a much bigger bird that we might see in the winter. American crows are common in Vermont, in the fields, flying above us, and trees, checking out compost containers, cleaning up dropped seed under backyard feeders. We'll talk in a minute about how to tell crows from their bigger cousins, ravens. But in general, if you see several of the dark birds together, there's a good possibility you're seeing crows. Crows tend to hang out in groups from family groups of 6, 7, 15, huge feeding groups in the hundreds. This bird is a relative newcomer to the United States. Back in the 1800s, some homesick Englishmen living in New York City asked friends back home to send over cages of every single bird mentioned, every single kind of bird mentioned in the plays and poems of an Englishman named William Shakespeare. Well, many of the poor displaced birds died, but a few loved their new country and their numbers exploded. And there are now millions of European starlings in the United States. Let me stop just a minute to let somebody in. Hi, Lorene. And they often come to backyard feeders, usually in groups. They look mostly black and sort of blah from a distance, but if you get a close look, they're actually quite beautiful with a teal color and gold and green and silver and black and the yellow on the bill. And this surprises some Vermonters, but we can actually see robins and bluebirds in the winter, especially in the Champlain Valley. Both species eat mostly fruit and insects, so they don't usually come to backyard feeders with seed on them. But every now and then, a hungry bluebird might be attracted to bits of suet. Or if the person doing the feeding is kind enough to put out mealworms, bluebirds sometimes come down to the feeders. particularly in harsh winters. In addition to all the birds we've seen already that hang around in the winter in Vermont, a few other kinds sometimes come down from Canada to join us, and other years they don't. Well, this year is a great year for evening grosbeaks. These are really big, chunky birds with thick necks, almost no neck, and these thick, powerful, conical bills, very good for eating hard seeds. The males are like this one, yellow, white, and black, sometimes almost bronze, white, and black, with pale bills and a really distinctive yellow eyebrow stripe. And the females are gray and black and pale gold, with that same big gross bill, which gave them their name. Gross beak, rather. And every 2 or 3 years, Vermont feeders can be overrun by little tiny birds, common redpolls, that can come down in the hundreds. These were just part of a flock of about 120. They're so hard to count, though, because they never stop moving. Common redpolls, we might see some this year. There's a wonderful resource called the Winter Finch Forecast. It was developed by a man up in Canada and now kept going by a group of Canadian bird watchers to help those of us who live farther south know what to expect each winter. And this winter's finch forecast says that there is a moderate to good chance of seeing redpolls this winter. So we should keep watching weedy fields where the flocks get together to feed on dry flower heads and at feeders. There's a lot of debate, by the way, about whether there's only one species of redpolls or two, the second one being a hoary redpoll, which may just be a different kind of common redpoll. But if you happen to see a redpoll flock and one is noticeably white, try to get a photo. This common redpoll is a little female. It got a red pole that gave them the name, little red on the top of her head. And amazingly, this little bird can survive temperatures down to 65 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. During the winter, they sometimes tunnel into the snow to stay warm at night. One very early morning a few winters ago, I was astonished to see the foot-deep snow on the barn roof heaving and shaking. It actually looked sort of spooky. And as I watched, 18 little redpolls emerged, shook the snow off their plumage, and flew down to the feeders. This is a male. He has the little red pole, but he also has a pink bib. I found this little bird lying outdoors upside down on the frozen ground one incredibly cold morning, apparently dead. I brought him inside and put him in a box and put the box in the room where our wood stove was blaring, making it so delightful. And I left him alone for it was almost an hour. And then I heard fluttering in the box. I took the box outside and held the little bird in my palm. And I was delighted that he gave a little energetic leap and flew across the yard. My guess is that he had either flown against the house and stunned himself, or been hit out of the air by a predator, such as a hawk, had fallen to the ground, and had almost frozen to death because he wasn't capable of flying right then. All he needed was just a warm place to recover. And speaking of predators, they happen if you're a backyard feeder. Those feeders sometimes attract big birds that eat little birds. The most common is the sharp-shinned hawk, like this one, that was seen in a backyard in Jericho. And I just absolutely love this picture because it shows the incredible intensity and concentration that raptors need to catch little tiny creatures that are very wary and that fly fast. Birds like this work hard for their meals. The smaller birds are always alert. You can be watching all sorts of activities in the backyard, and then all of a sudden, in an instant, almost all the little birds are gone. They've just disappeared into thin air. And the one or two that might remain are completely motionless. And they will stay in one position for many minutes, waiting until they feel that the coast is clear. Oh, and this is a good place to mention that other Vermont birders have generously donated photos for use in this program. And unless those photographers are given credit, pictures were taken either by me or by my partner, Bernie Paquette, with the majority Bernie's. You can sort of tell if they're sort of blurry, they're mine. And if not, they're not. And finally, backyard feeders in the winter sometimes attract another kind of big bird, one that excites and delights almost everyone. Imagine that you're an owl. You live by catching mice or voles or moles, maybe a red squirrel from time to time. And in the winter, little mice and voles and things are running around in tunnels under the snow. But you have unbelievably good hearing. So good that you can hear where a mouse is, even under many inches of snow. But imagine that that snow is covered with a layer of ice. You hear the mouse down there with your awesome owl hearing. You drop down with your sharp talons extended, but you can't break through the ice quickly enough, and the mouse escapes. And in winters where we have either very deep snow or, just a minute, I want to back up here for a minute. Very deep snow or ice on the snow, lots of barred owls get very close to starvation or actually starve to death. Well, what a lot of them have figured out is that small rodents, like mice, sometimes dig themselves out of their tunnels so they can pick up the dropped seed around backyard feeders. And the owls show up too, just waiting in nearby trees. This bird hung out in a tree between our house and our neighbor's house for 3 days. I think it was 2 winters ago. And we think it's the same owl that we saw early one morning, hunkered down in our driveway over a rabbit. A rabbit is an extremely large prey for a barred owl. They usually take something they can swallow whole. But that bird was starving, and he was going to take anything he could get, he or she, I can't tell the difference. The bird was not disturbed even when we woke up, started making noise in the house, started turning on lights. It was not going to leave that rabbit until it had eaten its full. Unlike most owls, or many owls anyway, barred owls can be seen in broad daylight. We saw this beauty a few minutes past noon. If you're participating in the Christmas bird count as a backyard feeder watcher, those birds you've seen are the ones you're most likely to see. I'm going to say now that I gave the same program on Tuesday and I left out some birds, so I stuck them in at the end. So we'll come back to those in a few minutes. And Tim just asked how to tell the difference between a sharp-shinned hawk that we saw a minute ago and a Cooper's hawk that's larger. And I'll mention that in just a few minutes. If you're a feeder watcher for the Christmas bird count, Audubon encourages you to watch for as many hours as you can on count day, but even a single hour can yield really valuable data because it's all rated by how much effort went into it anyway. So it won't confuse the scientists. And be sure to count the greatest number of each species that you see at any one moment. I mean, chickadees are going to be zipping back and forth all day. Don't count every visit. Just record the largest number of chickadees that you see at once. Now, if you're a traveling birder on the Christmas bird count, there are a lot more possibilities you might see. Let's stick with owls first. Snowy owls don't show up in Vermont every winter, but it is really exciting when they do. It's mostly immature snowy owls that come south from Canada in the winter, so they're not really snowy. They don't have the totally white feathers of an adult. And they come south in years when there's more owls than food up in Canada. A couple of years ago was an amazing lemming year, and all the female owls were healthy, and they laid lots of eggs, and all the babies survived. And then winter came, and there were just too many owls for the food source. And the younger ones get kicked out, basically, and they come south. And that year, snowy owls flooded the United States. One was seen, I mean, they were seen in Massachusetts, and they were seen in the Carolinas. One actually flew as far south as the Bahamas, which doesn't happen very often. So snowy owls, when you see them on in the field, they can look like just a chunk of light and dark until you get a chance to see that they have big, bright yellow eyes. This snowy owl liked to hang out on the top of a piece of farm equipment and scan the fields for little action that would suggest a mouse or a vole. And this one hung out at the top of a house in South Burlington that was being built, so that it was in a new development, and the digging up of the dirt around it for other houses was scaring out a lot of rodents. So that was really good hunting right there. The next bird is also mostly white, or partly white anyway, but a whole lot smaller. And they come in groups. Snow buntings might be seen swirling over a field like this, looking like a little blizzard. In fact, the folk name for snow buntings used to be snowflakes, which I think is sort of cute. And they're sometimes joined by two other small birds that come here in the winter: horned larks and the much less common Lapland longspurs. All three species sometimes are in the same flock, and they all completely disappear once they come down in an agricultural field with a little bit of grasses or corn left over. So if you see a flock and then you see them come down, you might have to actually stop a car and wait for them to move again to get a good look. Sometimes, though, they are really easy to see. One time, Bernie and I were driving along a back road in Ferrisburg, and when we passed a huge manure pile topped with many, many tires. Well, it was a bitterly cold day. I think it was in February, and the sun on all those black tires apparently created a mini climate. And a flock of 250 or more snow buntings took advantage of that relative warmth, along with a few each of the horned larks and Lapland longspurs. It was really a treat. We just sat and watched them for half an hour. We might also see waxwings when we're hanging around in Vermont in the winter. These are beautiful and gregarious birds. They chow down on sumac berries, mountain ash, wild grapes, and ornamental fruit trees. And the two species look quite similar, at least in shape. They both had those black masks and the little crests, the yellow at the end of their tail, and a little red on the end of the wing feathers that gave them the name waxwing. But Bohemian waxwings are heftier. They actually look like cedar waxwings on steroids. And one really good field mark of Bohemian waxwing that you can't see terribly well in this picture is that they have a kind of brick red color under the tail, whereas the cedar waxwing is all white under the tail. And some years, we Vermonters get to see large flocks of pine grosbeaks, another grosbeak with a big, big beak. They're usually found where there are ornamental crabapple trees. All the pictures that we have of them, we took at Technology Park in South Burlington, because they've got lots and lots of ornamental crab trees. By late winter, this fruit is all withered and soft and apparently absolutely delicious to pine grosbeaks, like this handsome male. A feeding flock will just stay right near a single tree or a group of trees until all the fruit is consumed and the trees are completely bare. Many of the pine grosbeaks that visit Vermont, though, in the winter aren't that gorgeous pink. They are either immature males, like this one, or females. This bird fledged just the summer before we saw him and took a picture of him. Well, let's switch from small birds to much bigger ones. Here are a few hawks to look out for. Red-tailed hawks are often seen soaring high in the sky at midday in the winter, when the sun has warmed up the ground and the parking lots and the roads to create nice thermals that hold them up. But they're also often seen on power poles and trees along major highways. The next bird is almost never seen along power poles or trees. These are northern harriers. They are either floating over fields and marshes and grasslands looking for prey, or they're hunkered down over something that they've just caught. This rich brown bird is a female. Males are much smaller, and they're colored gray, white, and black, and birders call the males gray ghosts, which I think is a lovely name. I'm always excited when I see a gray ghost. Well, I love harriers anyway, but they're outnumbered by the females hugely, so it's a rare treat to see a gray ghost. Rough-legged hawks are here in the Northeast only from November through March. Again, they're a bird that comes down here to the great warmth of Vermont. By late March, these handsome hawks depart for their breeding grounds in the Arctic. And in the winter, they're most often seen in the Champlain Valley, hunting the agricultural fields in Addison County. But a few have been seen in many other places in Vermont. The species has a lot of plumage diversity. Some of them are almost all dark, and this is a lighter one. They usually have, though, a darker patch at the wrists, that part of their wing that is equivalent to our wrists. And they very often have a very dark belly band. And they're recognized by their habit of hovering over a field like a huge kestrel. And speaking of kestrels, a few of these small falcons have been seen during the winter in almost all of the areas where there are Christmas bird counts going on. The two larger cousins of the American kestrel have also been seen, merlins, which are a bit bigger, about the same shape, and considerably darker overall, and peregrine falcons. Any of those three might be seen at this time of year, and a good place to look for a peregrine falcon is on top of a barn or a silo, where one might be just on the lookout for pigeons or starlings. Or if you're in the city, look on the UVM water tower, where there are often peregrine falcons. Now here's a Cooper's hawk, very similar to the sharp-shinned hawk we saw earlier when we were talking about feeder birds, and part of the same family, the accipiter family. Accipiters are hawks that are designed to hunt in woods, and birds are a lot of their food. It isn't easy to tell a Cooper's hawk from a sharp-shinned hawk. The sharp-shinned overall are smaller, but the females are considerably larger than males, which is a consistent thing with most raptors. So a good-sized sharp-shinned, female sharp-shinned can be bigger than a small Cooper's male. Both species have relatively short wings and long barred tails. In flight, it's actually easier to tell them apart than perched, because in flight, a Cooper's hawk's head sticks out past the leading line of its wings, and a sharp-shinned's head is sort of tucked back. In fact, they sometimes look almost headless. Check your field guide for other distinguishing characteristics, but realize that sometimes you're not going to know which one you're seeing. It's possible to just report accipiter species, which is actually more scientifically helpful than taking a guess. There is a third member of that same family that occur in Vermont. It's a northern goshawk, named goshawk because it's our only hawk that could actually take a goose. It's a goosehawk. They are bigger and grayer than this really big female Cooper's hawk, and much rarer. If you think you're seeing a goshawk on bird count day, it'd be great if you could get a photo, and even a fuzzy picture can help in ID. Now, all three of these accipiters used to be primarily woods birds, but they have learned things over the last 20 or 30 years. They have learned that backyard feeders are like smorgasbords, and now they're seen in small towns and suburbs, and even sometimes in cities. This big female Cooper's hawk caught 3 mourning doves at our feeders on 3 consecutive mornings. Bald eagles have also been seen in many of Vermont's Christmas bird count circles. The adults are unmistakable, that brilliant white head and a brilliant white tail, and they're huge. The immatures, and they're going to stay looking immature for a couple of years, are just as big, but they're dark brown and streaky. And either age, they fly with almost perfectly flat wings very often. These huge birds sometimes congregate near ice fishermen, waiting for bait to be tossed out their way. It's a little early right now for ice fishing, but you still might see an eagle overhead near any body of water or perched atop a tall tree. And we're lucky here in Vermont to have lots of good-sized bodies of water in Vermont, many of which don't freeze every single year. Here's a quick look at the kinds of ducks and other birds that might be seen on Vermont waters. Mergansers used to be called sawbills because their bills are actually serrated. They're not teeth, but they act like teeth, because these birds eat mostly fish, and fish are really slippery, and the serrations help them hold on to the fish. We have two kinds of mergansers that are often seen during Vermont winters: common merganser, like this handsome male, and the smaller hooded mergansers. And the females of both species are mostly brown and gray with really messy brown hairdos. It is possible to see a third and much less common kind of merganser, the red-breasted merganser. And we don't have a good picture of one yet, but a good way to tell them, the males particularly, is that the red-breasted merganser will have a white neckband with dark above and below. And the red-breasted male will also have mottled sides rather than this beautiful bright white. Now, common golden eyes truly are common. There have been rafts, that's what a flock on the water is called, rafts, of counting in the tens of thousands on Lake Champlain in the winter. The males have rich black and white patterning on their sides, and their heads can appear black or glossy green. And Sarah, the photographer, is here tonight with us. Thank you. I've loved this picture ever since I first saw it. The females have brown heads with mottled gray wings and backs, and both sexes have the diagnostic golden eyes that gave the species their name. Sarah Rosedal says, thank you. You're welcome. It's such a pleasure to get all these beautiful pictures. This little bird, the bufflehead, and I love this picture because of the reflection. This is North America's smallest diving duck. And the size and shape of that white patch on the drake's head changes depending on how excited or agitated or defiant or aggressive or amorous he is feeling. The females are overall dark, but they have smaller white patches sort of horizontal just below the eye. It's also possible to see both lesser and greater scaup on Vermont lakes in the winter. Male greaters look very much like male lessers, and the females of the two species also look very similar. So sometimes there's almost pitched battles between birders who are looking at one and somebody thinks it's a lesser and the other thinks it's a greater, and they're too far out and the waves keep going like this and it's cold and they're difficult to tell apart. But you can look at the shape of the head. You can look at how close the eye is to the top of the head. And then if they fly while you're watching them, you can look at how much white shows in the wing. And all of that will show in your field guides. I saw 7 lesser scaup at Shelburne Bay just last week, recognizable because they had rounder heads. Well, all those various things, and I'm pretty sure they were lesser scaups. But again, I might have been wrong. Scaup and goldeneye, mergansers and buffleheads are all diving ducks. Well, flocks of diving ducks are often joined by familiar dabbling ducks, such as mallards, probably the most familiar duck. Mallards sometimes make shallow dives. I mean, all the dabblers do, but usually they just tip up and put their heads in the water to find food. And they hang out with the diving ducks because when a diving duck comes up with a tasty mussel or something, some of the dabbling ducks will just take after them like a shot and startle the diving duck into dropping the morsel, and then the dabbling duck will grab it fast before it sinks too far. Another common dabbling duck is the American black duck. The males and females both look somewhat like female mallards, but the mallards have much yellower bills. And other dabbling ducks, gadwalls, widgeons, pintails, and others, are possible but rare, and a photo might be needed to have those sightings accepted. Geese are also possible sightings during the Christmas bird count season all winter long here in Vermont. Both Canada geese and snow geese. Snow geese usually are gone by mid-November at the latest and usually don't return north until March, but there might be a few around. Big flocks of water birds also include some that aren't ducks or geese, such as horned grebes. These appealing little birds dive often and spend a very long time on each dive. So you could be standing on the shore at some place like Charlottetown Beach, and you can scan the water and you can be absolutely sure there's nothing out there. And you wait another 3 minutes and all of a sudden there are several horned grebes that just popped up. Common loons can also be seen in many Vermont bodies of water during the winter. And this is how most of us think of common loons, just resplendent in deep black and crisp white. But they change their plumage in the winter, and their gray colors blend incredibly well with icy waters. They're recognizable by their size, their sort of heaviness. They have a feeling of just being heavy, and that huge bill. And when you're near the water, you're almost sure to see some gulls. The most common winter gulls here in Vermont are ring-billed gulls with yellow legs and, of course, that neat ring on the bill, and herring gulls with pink legs and that dot of red on the lower mandible. But we might also see a great black-backed gull, the very largest gull in the world, or maybe a much smaller Bonaparte's gull. All 4 species have been seen at this time of year. And there's also a possibility of a rare gull, so keep your field guide handy and try to get a photo. And remember that any group of gulls is likely to include individuals of different ages, and their plumage changes for the first 3 or 4 years of their lives. This herring gull doesn't yet have that totally crisp white and gray and black of the adult we saw a minute ago. I like this picture because if you notice, the gull is banded, which is really interesting. If you can get the number on a band, you can actually, there's a website for banded birds, and you can put in the number and you can find out where your bird was banded. One more good-sized bird that's a good possibility right now, in fact, a really excellent possibility, are common ravens. They are indeed common all over Vermont. And sometimes it's hard to tell whether you're seeing a raven or a crow. As I mentioned before, if it's a large group of them, it's probably a crow. But if they make a noise, it really helps. American crows really do say caw, caw, just like little kids learn they say. And we have some fish crows in Vermont, and they make a staccato like they're saying no, But ravens have a huge variety of noises. They have this deep growling croak that can be heard for a mile. They have gurgling noises. They have harsh grating noises. They have really loud knocks. They have a sound that sounds like a typewriter space bar, if anyone out there remembers that sound. If you don't hear anything from a bird, and it's only one and it's soaring, it's probably a raven. But you can look to see if it has long, slightly pointed wings and a fairly long wedge-shaped tail. And then if you're close enough, you can see if it has a shaggy-looking throat, because that's a raven characteristic and not a crow characteristic. So when I did this program on Tuesday, fellow birders reminded me that I'd left out several bird species. So here they are, even more beautiful birds that we might see during Vermont winters. First, we might see two members of the woodpecker family, in addition to the hairy and downy and pileated woodpeckers. I think red-bellied woodpeckers were first seen in Vermont in the first decade of this century, or toward the end of the 1900s. They're fairly recent, but they quickly expanded, and now they show up in a wide swath through the western half of the state and along the Connecticut River Valley. This is one of those species with a really unhelpful name. Don't look for a red belly. Instead, look for a overall sort of pale, medium-sized woodpecker with a light-colored belly, lots of beautiful black and white barring on the back. And the males are red on their nape and crown. The females are red on the nape only. The other woodpecker relative is the northern flicker. It's funny, they're quite common. We don't have a good picture of one yet. We're gonna have to try to get a good picture of a northern flicker because they really are beautiful. Most flickers have left the area by December because this is a woodpecker that tends to feed on the ground rather than on trees, and the ground gets frozen. But a few have been seen every single month of the year. A few years ago, Bernie and I joined the Islands Christmas Bird Count, and I think a flicker was our last sighting of the day, or it was one of the last anyway. I also omitted on Tuesday two beautiful birds, three actually, wild turkeys, ruffed grouse, and spruce grouse, and I cannot imagine how I forgot them. We have been seeing lots of turkeys recently on lawns, in farm fields, crossing the roads. These big birds are unmistakable, even without that flaring tail of the amorous male. This small flock visited our yard a few years ago, cleaning up dropped birdseed. And Vermont has two species of grouse. Spruce grouse, like this beauty we saw at Moose Bog in the Northeast Kingdom, are found only in the Northeast Kingdom. Ruffed grouse are all over the state. This startled-looking individual was one of a flock of at least 7 ruffed grouse that hung out in our backyard for several days in early August, startling us when they flew up right in front of us with a huge whir of wings, and then delighting us when we kept seeing them here on the yard, and then there in the yard, and then other places in the yard. Winter birding can bring many, many surprises. So if you are doing a Christmas bird count, or if you're just enjoying yourself out there, watch for oddities and rarities. This may seem impossible, but some yellow-rumped warblers might be hanging around. These little birds can winter farther north than most warblers because their systems can handle things like bayberry and wax myrtle, which most birds can't digest at all. One cold winter day, I came across a little flock of yellow-rumped warblers at the DAR State Park in Addison. And winter bird lovers should keep their eyes peeled for crossbills. We don't yet have a good picture of red crossbills, and they're much more common in Vermont and have been seen in several places in the state already this winter. But this white-winged crossbill shows that unusual bill that gave the birds their names. Their mandibles are crossed over each other. That helps them get into tightly closed conifer cones and get the nutritious seeds. And both kinds of crossbills usually appear in small flocks, not one at a time. Or maybe you might see and document a late great blue heron. One was seen in Underhill only a few days ago. Or a belted kingfisher, or a northern shrike. This picture was taken on an extremely foggy day, so it's not good, but it does show the shrike's characteristic hooked bill. Or maybe you might see an eastern mockingbird. Few of these hang out all winter long, every year. Or a late turkey vulture. Someone saw one today. Or a real rarity like a northern hawk owl. We haven't seen one of those in several years here. Or a gorgeous harlequin duck on some body of water. For those of you who are doing a Christmas bird count, it's important to know how to count. As I mentioned before, the home feeder watchers count the greatest number of species seen at any one time. But traveling birders tally every single bird. You're going to end up with a huge number of chickadees counted, and that's okay. Let me just check. We have a chat question here. Oh, good. Judy Bond said we had a shrike on the Tri-County Christmas count, which is brand new. The Tri-County Audubon Christmas Bird Count Circle started last year, and it takes in part of Chittenden, Franklin, and Lamoille counties. I'd forgotten that, Judy. So traveling birders are going to end up with humongous numbers of some birds. And you count every single bird you see. You might think, well, it's the same chickadee, he's following us, but you count every single one. If you're participating in this year's Christmas bird count, be sure to document any bird that puzzles you, any bird you and your team can't agree upon, and any bird that you do agree upon and you're absolutely sure is a really rare find. Get a photo if you can. Take really good notes. How many of you saw that bird? Where was it? What was it doing? What did the bird look like exactly? What was its size and shape and colors? Did it have any wing bars? Did it have any splotching on the breast? Did it have a little crest? Did you see the colors of its legs? As much as you can get. What optics were the observers using? Because that will help Audubon rate the sighting. And what other species did you and your group consider? And then why did you reject those? Why did you think it was this other bird that you've reported? And remember, no matter how excited you are, safety is going to come first. Pull off the road to watch birds, put your four-way blinkers on, check before stepping out of the car. We don't want somebody run over while they're Christmas bird watching. And be respectful of private property. If there is a really thrilling bird sitting right on someone's side porch, get a photo from the road if possible. And then maybe you could go knock on the door and tell the homeowner about the Christmas bird count and what you're seeing and enlist his or her help. They might already have great photos that they can email you, or they might have some really good information about how long the bird has been around. Are they feeding it? What are they feeding it, etc. So bundle up warmly, bring a thermos of something hot, take photos of anything rare or unusual or confusing, enjoy yourselves, and have a great and birdie day. And thank you all for coming, by the way. Combined with the group that was here on Tuesday, that's almost 100 people, I think, who've seen this and are excited about winter birding. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I am so sorry. Oh, shoot. Well, I'm going to leave it here in case anyone wants to chat. Thank you, Laura. What have people been seeing themselves, by the way? Somebody on Tuesday's program mentioned that they had seen a flock of turkeys with some whitish ones in them, and we saw that also. And I haven't yet done enough research to find out if wild turkeys ever hybridize with domesticated turkeys. I don't know what's going on. I've never seen such a thing. Someone else just said there was a shrike in the yard last week. I haven't seen a shrike in a couple of years. I'd love to see one. That's great. Shrikes, by the way, used to be called butcher birds. Because they have an odd habit of catching something. They catch sometimes like big insects like dragonflies, but they also catch little birds sometimes, and they catch more than they can eat at any one time. And they store them by pushing them against barbed wire or thorns. So it's their little pantry or something. And that was why they were called butcher birds. Jason Cook said he heard a barred owl today. That's great. I haven't. Oh, and Sarah heard two great horned owls talking to each other. I didn't even include a picture of great horned owls, Sarah, because we see them so rarely and we hear them only at night, almost always at night. In fact, I think I've never heard one in the daytime. But yes, that is a possibility. A lucky person may either see or hear a great horned owl, particularly if they're going to do a little bit of owling, nighttime owling. And Laura said that they've been seeing huge flocks of waxwings with evening grosbeaks among them. That's really interesting. Along the Winooski in Richmond. So if you go to Richmond and you walk either the Volunteer Trail, which is right in back of the band shell, or along the Beacon Rivershore Preserve Trail, maybe you'll see them there. And Judy Bond said that it's been pretty quiet. Actually, I may be reading these backwards. I may be reading yes, Judy said, pretty quiet, but there were some Bohemian waxwings in Underhill last week. That's great. I haven't seen them yet. Oh, nice. And Cindy Sprague said that she's been seeing a barred owl around the house and a pileated woodpecker. We heard a pileated woodpecker just, was that today? Yes. We were out visiting a friend in Starksboro, and they've got a wonderful feeder arrangement in the back of the house, but this pileated woodpecker was quite distant, but quite loud. It's in a wooded area. So good, people are seeing a lot of the beautiful birds of winter. And again, thank you so much for coming. Whoop, there's one new message. Oh, are the winter robins different from the summer ones? That's a good question, Carol, because many species do change their plumage. But no, the winter robins look pretty much different, pretty much the same. In fact, I think they look identical. The males and females look slightly different in that the females are slightly less brilliant colored sometimes, a little bit not as crisp difference between the head and the breast. So you might be seeing a female, but in general, the winter ones are going to keep their plumage. However, the winter robins we see might be different birds than the ones you saw in the summer. Some banding studies have shown that the robins that we have here in the winter actually nested in Canada. And the robins that nested here are down in southern Pennsylvania or New Jersey or the Catskills, the Carolinas right now, which is sort of interesting, but we can't tell that with our eyes. Well, thank you again. And I hope to maybe see you on the birding trail sometime. Now I can figure out how to do this. There we go.